Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Timmy Kemza James. So in today's video, I'm going to teach you how to pipe the neck of a kaftan like so. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what I usually will do is to measure 20 inches vertically and 20 inches horizontally on a plain fabric. Then I go ahead to connect both lines to give me a slanted line. So that's what I'm doing, because cutting on bias is simply not cutting on the selvage, but on both, on opposite selvage, that's opposite each other. That's a slanted line basically. So when I measure, I have the length is usually more than what my neck round would be, so I'll just go ahead and cut. Now I'm going to measure 1.5 inches across that line and also connect it straight as well, because that's what I'm going to cut. Now the reason I chose 1.5 is because when I'm done, I want my piping to be, it shouldn't even be up to half of an inch, but if you want it to be half of an inch, you use 2 inches. If you want it more than half of an inch, you go ahead and double in the measurement. So 1.5 is okay for me, so I'm just going ahead to cut this out. Then I go ahead to press. Now the next thing I'll be doing is to be folding it into each other, so the two rough edges will meet at the middle side of the point, and I'm going to press down. If you have a bias maker, you can go ahead and use that, but I don't have a bias maker, so I'm just making do with just my iron and my hands, guys. So you just go ahead and sort of fold one raw edge into the middle and another raw edge to meet it into the middle, the way you normally would see your store-bought bias tape. So that's what I'm just going to do. So by the time I'm done folding and meeting at the middle, I'm going to bring hemming gum and put in the middle side of that. And so that what I'm just doing basically is to get it to hold the two raw edges together so that it doesn't move. If you don't have hemming gum, you can just omit that process, but I have it, and I usually will just do that with hemming gum, guys. So you should also use hemming gum. So what the hemming gum basically is going to do for me is to make the corners really crisp and sharp. So by the time I'm done, this is what it's going to look like. So on the right side, you can see it looking all nice, and on the wrong side, you see that whitish thing you're seeing is from the hemming gum. So what I'm going to do now is to bend it over again and iron on top of that. Now this time around, I'm not going to be adding any hemming gum, but it will be good for you to use this. If you have a steam iron, you go ahead and use your steam iron, right? I'm just trimming off the excess on the side. So but if you don't have a steam iron, you should go ahead and spray water on it so that it helps it lie nicely. Now I'm not folding exactly to the midpoint of it, right? The lower side is a little bit longer than the one up. Reasons being that when I sew, I want to be sure that I'm going to be sewing on the upper side, and when I'm sewing it, I want to be sure that it's catching the lower side as well. So you want the one on the downside to be a little bit wider than the upper fold that you're folding. So I'm not folding exactly on the midpoint to have it like exact same thing. I'm just leaving a little bit on that other side. That's the lower side where is on the table. The side on the table now is a little bit wider than the side up that I'm seeing. So I just hope you understand what I'm saying, ja. So I'm just going to continue ironing like that, and you use your steam iron to get that to be nice and sharp. If you cannot have access to any steam iron, just go ahead and press with water as well. That will go a long way to help you. So when I'm done, this is what it will look like. Now let's go over to the sewing machine and put our neck together. So now on the sewing machine, what I'm going to do is to flip that open, and then I'll turn it like to the opposite direction. So now I'm going to be sewing on the wrong side just to close off this point where I'm going to start binding my neck with. So you just want to close that place by making a stitch across and back stitching. Make sure that you're back stitching on the same straight line. then you cut out any excess that you have. You just want to have a little bit to cut very close to the sewing allowance, and you flip it over. You get your scissors or your loop turner and push the corners to bring it out properly. When you're done, you grab your shirt that you've already joined the back side together. So this is the shirt. Cut out any excess thread or any fraying material that is on that neck, because you're going to be binding and your bias is not so big to sort of cover everything. So you cut out any fraying thread that you have. Now I'm going to put my neck in between my bias, right? So I'm just tucking the neck of the shirt inside of the bias, and I'm going to stitch very close to the hem of the bias, right? So I don't know if you understand what I mean, but you can see I'm just putting it inward, and you make sure that you tuck it in properly. So basically you're just going to use your creativity here. So I'm just going to be sewing, and for this sewing you don't have to speed it up. It's a gentle process. You tuck in and then you go ahead and stitch. You tuck in and you stitch until you get very close to the other extreme. So you open up the bias, you place your material properly, and you stitch like that. So when I get to the other corner, when I get close to that corner, I'll stop stitching and just measure out what would finish off my neckline and sort of cut, leaving a little bit of allowance to close that other extreme with it. So I'll just sew a little bit more, and by the time I get close to the side of the placket on that side, just what I did to the beginning point of that placket by turning it over, now I'll take it out of my sewing machine and I would switch it over. Now I'm trimming it off very close to that placket hem, then I'll flip it over, right, and I'll just sew it closed. Then I'll come back and turn it over, cut out any sewing allowance, excess sewing allowance that I have, like so, and I'll flip it over. If you have a loop turner, go ahead and use it, but if you don't, you push it in to bring out those corners with your scissors, and you go back in to sew again and close of everything together. Now don't forget that you're sewing very close to your the hem of your bias. So by the time you sew and you're done sewing, that is it. But you can also come over to sew like 2 or 3 more stitch. Like you can top stitch on that neckline, that's on the bias, close to the other extreme of the bias, and also at the middle you can make 4 or 5 stitches round that bias. Is totally up to you, and it will just, but even this one stitch is fine, but to give it more glam, you can go ahead and stitch it more than once. You can do 2 lines, you can do 3, you can do 4 or 5. I think I've seen 5. I've never used 5 for my own outfits that I'm making, but mostly I use 3 rolls. So that would just be it. Now you can see this is what it looks like. Now you can go ahead, just like I said, you repeat top stitching it like 2 more times, and that will be it. When you're done, you give it a nice press, and that will be it. So please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. See you in my next video, guys.